everyone. Welcome back to Mystifying Miracles. My name is Kristen, and we go over true stories every week, sometimes twice a week, and we just talk about true stories that have happened to people, and they always have a miracle aspect. A lot of times, more than one. Join in and listen, and we'll get started with our first story. Have you ever, lost something that was just so valuable? Perhaps it was so sentimental, and maybe it was lost for a day, months, years, and then it was found again. I can't say that's happened to me, but it happened to the woman in our story today. Today's story, I found out of a book I have been reading, and it's called Real Life, Real Miracles by James Garlow and Keith Wall, and I'll post that in the description box. So our story, it begins with a woman by the name of Deborah and her husband, Jim. They lived in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, and one day they decided to go out on Jim's bike. He loved motorcycles, and they were going to go ahead and just grab a bite to eat some lunch. And the highway that they were traveling on, particularly, was Highway 295. And it was undergoing just a ton of construction. It was being repaved. Deborah knew this, so she was a bit hesitant, a bit nervous about even getting on the bike to begin with. But, Jim talked her into it, and they thought, why not? We'll be careful. So they go on their way. They're riding along the highway, and they come upon a sign. The sign said, "Motorcycles, use caution." And as soon as they passed that, immediately the bike started shaking, and it was trying to go, Jim was trying to carefully go over loose gravel, and this one part, the loose gravel, was just kind of making the bike go a little wonky. And then he got the first tire over into the next lane. He wanted to ease into the next lane because it had already been paved. So he was trying to get, to a little bit safer, stable riding conditions. And so the first tire makes it over the bump into the next lane over the loose gravel, but the back tire doesn't. It ends up going all wonky, sliding all over the place. And as you can imagine, they wreck. So as that's happening, they're going about 50 miles per hour, and Deborah ends up flying off the bike through the air. And she remembers as she was flying, through the air off the bike, looking and seeing Jim and the bike kind of falling sideways onto the pavement. And Jim's trying to hoist his body as it's sliding into oncoming traffic. He's trying to slide his body up on top of the side of the bike that's sliding, so that he doesn't get smushed or hurt any way he can, thinking it's, in a blink of an eye kind of a decision. So she remembers seeing that as she's flying off. Well, Deborah hits the concrete, remembers hitting her head, bouncing twice off the pavement, and she's her body slides into this grassy area. That says she slid across, the oncoming traffic all the way across and into the grassy median on the other side. As this was happening, one little miracle part of this story, an EMT happened to be driving by and saw the crash occur. He, pulls over, gets out, immediately goes to Deborah to try to help her. And, he's yelling, "Don't move," because he knows as an EMT, if you have a head injury, spinal injury, you want to stabilize that. You don't want to move, make it worse. So he also runs to his car because in the back seat, he kept a neck brace. He brought that, and, he's trying to assemble everything and put that onto Deborah and keep her still. As kind of Deborah's coming to and she's, remembering and seeing these things happen, guess who was next to the EMT? None other but Jim himself. He survived. Another miracle in my opinion. But yeah, he was standing right there next to the EMT, kind of helping, making sure Deborah was okay. And the paramedics arrive. They're loading, carefully Deborah's body in a straight position onto the board so that they can get her into the ambulance and take her to the hospital. So as that's happening and they're hoisting her up into the back of the ambulance, she looks down and she notices her engagement ring. It's missing its 2-carat diamond. And she begins to kind of panic and think about it because it had, sentimental value to her. Not to mention it's an expensive item. She's being hoisted up. She tells her husband, Jim, my ring, it's gone, the diamond. And she tells him, please look for it, as they're taking her to the hospital. But Jim, that wasn't even on his mind at the time. He was just thankful and blessed that Deborah made it. And him, but that Deborah's going to be okay. She was going to get to the hospital, get treatment, and hopefully things were going to work out. They made it. Thank the Lord. Kind of a little backstory too, just a little bit about the ring, why this was sentimental to Deborah. At the age of 18, Deborah had run away from home and she ended up actually in Europe. Now, I don't know the details of that, exactly how that happened, but she ran away. She ended up in Europe, Amsterdam, to be exact. She found her way to a hostel. It was like for youth there in Amsterdam, and it was actually run by a Christian ministry at the time. Guess who was working the front desk there? Yep. Jim. And she just remembers seeing a handsome young man. He was very helpful. He helped her be able to find a bed, a place to sleep in the hostel that evening. Soon enough, Deborah actually ended up applying for a job. They hired her. She was hired to just change the linens on all the beds there at the hostel. And she enjoyed it. She became good friends with Jim. The both of them ended up going and attending Bible study there. And when they went to that first Bible study, that was actually the first time that Deborah ever heard that there was a Heavenly Father that cared about his children. She had never really known that or heard that concept. Well, some time went by and Jim and Deborah, they fell in love. He proposed, they got engaged, the whole 9 yards. Well, Jim, during that process of, them being engaged, he told her about a special ring that had been in his family for a long time, decades. And it happened to belong to his great aunt Moni, and she had it back during the roaring 20s, the 1920s. His great aunt Moni ended up giving it to her nephew, Charles. Charles had 2 sons by the name of John and Jim. And the plan was that he was going to, out of that trio of diamonds from Aunt Moni's ring, he was going to give one each to his sons, to give to their future brides. Just a little background on that. So back to the present day, Deborah was recovering in the hospital for a while and she just couldn't get it out of her head. This ring, it meant so much to her and what happened to her and how she met Jim as a young adult. She just had to find it. I'm that personality too, that type. When I lose something sentimental, I just cannot stop thinking about that thing. So I can totally see myself in that position if I was Deborah. And so these thoughts just keep on coming and going. And, Deborah's mind, she had it for 32 years on her hand. She couldn't believe it was gone. So she ends up, while she's recovering, emailing her church congregation and about the ring and the accident. And wouldn't you know, several of the members there at the church got together just a little search party to kind of go and try to help, because Deborah couldn't go at this point. She was still in the hospital recovering. So they formed a little team and went out to try and find her diamond. They searched, and searched, a whole party of them, and nothing. They even had the highway patrol help, direct traffic, so that they could really get a good thorough search in, but couldn't find it. The next week after that happened, Deborah's brother, he suggested, hey, I've got an idea. How about I take a leaf blower and, blow some things around and just comb over it a second time? Maybe that'll, bring about, blowing things around, and we'll be able to find it. So him and about a half dozen guys, they get their leaf blowers. They've got shop vacs, a generator, and they're set. They're going to go try to find this thing. So they do. They collect bags and bags of just debris, grass, dirt, and, they bring the bags back to try to search through them. Deborah was feeling good enough to help do that. So she was even going through the bags and sifting through everything, doing everything she could to try to find this. And again, no luck. The ring was not found. Well, the diamond that was in her ring was not found. 29 days had now at this point passed since the day of the motorcycle accident. And at this point, Deborah was at home recovering, so she was no longer in the hospital. Jim, knew she had been cooped up, first in the hospital, now at home. She was feeling good enough to get out for a bit. So he kind of talked her into, come on, let's just take a little drive. Just get out for a bit. You need some fresh air. They do. They get into their car and they head down the highway. Happened to be the same highway that the accident, came about. So when they get to the scene where the accident actually occurred on the highway, Deborah notices it. And she was like, she makes Jim pull over and stop. She convinced him, look, just let me look for a few minutes. I have to do it. We just passed it, the place. Let me look one more time. So he relents and pulls over. She gets out, starts searching. She's not finding anything in the beginning. She goes around to the back of the car and she's kind of sifting, just looking around on the ground. And she notices a 332, and it was printed just on the pavement, spray painted. And it jogged Deborah's memory. She remembers seeing the numbers 332 on the police report from the accident. So she knew immediately, aha, they spray painted that. This is where it took place. It's got to be right here somewhere. So she doesn't stop looking. She's still going, looking around, especially after she sees that number on the pavement. And eventually, after a while passes, Jim tells her, look, Deborah, this is just going to upset you. Let's get back into the car. Deborah begins to weep. She's crying. She's just upset thinking about this and not being able to find it still. Before she got back into the car, she was just so upset, crying. She dropped to her knees for a minute and she said a little prayer and she just asked God for help. Please, Lord, you know what this means to me. Again, it wasn't just a sentimental thing. Things can be replaced, but this couldn't. And she just wanted to do her darndest to try to find this thing. So she was just calling on help from God. She's praying and talking. And as she's talking to God, she notices a little bit of trash down on the ground. So she's looking, and still praying. And she notices a dirty piece of paper. And it was kind of in a grassy area right there. Under that was a smushed soda can. And on the can, it read sparkling. So that kind of, made her think for a minute she saw some loose dirt and it said mineral dust. Not sure what that is, but it was there underneath the soda can. So she decides to just take her hand and brush it around. What is that kind of a thing? As she did that, she saw something that had some bulk to it, but she couldn't recognize what it was at that time. She's just what is that? She reaches, she picks it up, and she could barely see because at this point, she's still crying and upset. So you know how when you're so upset, your eyes are all blurry. So that's kind of how it was. That's why she couldn't really see what it was that she was holding. So she gives it to Jim and she's like, what is this? Jim takes it and he just starts laughing and clapping. And he was like, oh my gosh, Deborah, it's your diamond. It was the actual diamond, a miracle, even though, most of our other stories, medical miracles and things about accidents and planes and this, not that, but still, like I always say, miracles come every day. big and small. And this was a big miracle to Deborah, while to us, looking, we may not think of that as, oh, that's a great miracle. But it actually is, and it was to Deborah. For whatever reason, the Lord allowed her to be able to find that. And after she called on him for help, and I just thought that was a cool story, something a little bit different. Today, she will tell people that her story isn't about a gym. It's about the precious relationship with God. God wants to have that relationship with his children. She sees like a different picture out of it rather than just, a thing of monetary value that's been passed down. God allowed her to see something else out of that, if you will. So I thought that was pretty neat. Let me know what you guys think. I know there might be various opinions on this, but I still do think there were miracles involved, as well as them surviving the motorcycle accident itself. Again, comment, like, and subscribe if you like these kind of stories, and we'll do it again in a few days. So until then, thank you so much for watching, and I love you guys.